I was born in a tiny village called Role in Mpumalanga in 1976, a year famous for the June 16 Soweto uprising, which saw thousands of black school children lead a protest against the introduction of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction in the townships. My parents named me Nyimpini, which translates to at war or a warrior. And I believe this was in many ways opposite for what was to come in my life. My father later told me that since I was born just 5 months after the events of 16 June, it was clear that the country itself was at war, and we all had to stand up and fight. As such, my given name was to remind him and people around us about the call to action. I love our African culture because there's a meaning and a rich story to each of our names. We ought to take the hint from our parents' intentions, for they wished for something through each of us. It is no surprise that people born around that time carried names like freedom, Matimba, power, Zamani, keep trying, justice, and Maihlome, take up arms and fight, which spoke to the desire to topple the apartheid government. I became a real fighter. I knew nothing would come easy in life, especially if you were among the most disadvantaged. Even among black people, there were degrees of being disadvantaged. There were the township blacks living in Soweto and other former Transvaal townships, who were, as a rule, better off than most because they were more likely to be working and literate. Then there were people like me, far away from urban areas, living in Bantustans or homelands as they were better known, with no viable, sustainable local economy. People there relied on government grants, and those formerly employed held a very limited number of public sector jobs such as police officers or teachers. The education delivered in these areas was inferior through under-resourced schools and teachers who were barely qualified, if they were qualified at all. Back then, you did not need a matric pass to become a teacher. All that was required to attend training as a teacher was to pass Standard 8 or Grade 10 in today's terminology. That is the kind of school I attended until I completed Standard 5 or Grade 7, Diageo Primary School. It was a public school with next to nothing by way of facilities. I vividly remember studying under a marula tree with a makeshift chalkboard propped up on my thighs. Looking back at growing up in Role with no running water or electricity and studying at Diageo, with no actual classrooms, under teachers who were trying their best, I think the lesson I was really learning was that allowing an underprivileged upbringing to affect our confidence in our ability to compete is a mistake. Kenyan athletes without fancy sports shoes, professional trainers, or advanced facilities frequently beat the rest of the world's runners. From this, it is important to learn that as difficult as our circumstances may be, we cannot use that to justify lagging. Today, my children are very privileged, able to attend some of the finest private schools in South Africa. Again, to illustrate the point, there is a school in the Vembe district of Limpopo, a public school with very basic facilities and no school fees, which is consistently one of the top schools in the country based on matric results. I believe nobody should be intimidated by the external factors or apparent limitations. We should give ourselves permission to compete despite an unequal footing. That said, I was not at the bottom of the pyramid. The truth is, I grew up relatively privileged in the context of the Bantustan. I was born to a mother who was a school teacher, earning a monthly income from the government.